A profound, almost suffocating silence descended upon the hearing chamber, pressing against the marble walls and filling the space between the high ceilings and the polished mahogany tables. Director Tulsi Gabbard sat at the witness table, a study in absolute, immovable stillness. Her hands rested flat upon the gleaming wood surface, not a tremor or a fidget betraying the slightest hint of nervous energy, her composure absolute. 2 decades of military discipline were evident in every inch of her posture. A rigid spine and squared shoulders that spoke of years standing at attention. Her dark blue suit was impeccable, tailored to a professional perfection, while a single, small American flag pin on her lapel caught the glare of the overhead television lights, glimmering like a beacon against the dark fabric. Behind her, the massive seal of the Senate Intelligence Committee loomed large on the marble wall, a reminder of the gravity and institutional power that filled the room. Across the divide of the aisle, Congressman Jamie Raskin leaned into his microphone, the harsh glare of the television lights reflecting sharply off his wire-rimmed spectacles. His gray hair was styled with a meticulous sort of carelessness, slightly disheveled in a way that suggested deep thought rather than lack of grooming, the kind of messy look that actually takes effort to maintain. He wore a blue blazer thrown over a crisp white shirt with no tie, cultivating the casual academic look, projecting the image of the approachable professor or the champion of the common people. His voice, when he finally spoke, carried through the chamber with a theatrical, practiced resonance, the distinct cadence of a constitutional law professor who had spent decades holding court in lecture halls. "Madame Director, your record is deeply, profoundly concerning," Raskin began, his tone dripping with disappointment. "You have repeatedly echoed talking points that originate directly from Russian propaganda channels. You met with the brutal dictator Bashar al-Assad. You have undermined American foreign policy at every conceivable turn." He continued his litany of accusations, his voice rising and falling for dramatic effect. "You questioned the integrity of our intelligence agencies. You abandoned the Democratic Party to align yourself with figures that many would classify as extremists." He shook his head slightly, as if in disbelief. "And now, incredibly, you hold the most sensitive intelligence position in our entire government." He paused then, a deliberate silence calculated for maximum effect, looking directly into the camera lenses before turning his gaze back to her. "How can the American people possibly trust you with our nation's secrets when your history suggests a lingering sympathy for our adversaries?" The question hung in the air, heavy and accusing. The entire room waited for her response. Reporters leaned forward in their chairs. Camera lenses zoomed in to capture the slightest twitch of emotion, and the gallery observers seemed to hold their breath in collective anticipation. Tulsi did not move for 3 full seconds. She did not blink. She did not react. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm and measured, yet it carried the unmistakable weight of command, the voice of someone who has given orders in active combat zones, where hesitation means death. "Point of order, Mr. Chairman," she said, her voice cutting through the lingering echo of Raskin's accusations. Senator Warner, the committee chairman, looked up from his notes, surprised by the interruption, but nodding his assent. "The witness is recognized," Warner stated. Tulsi stood up then, not quickly or aggressively, but with the deliberate, controlled movement of a soldier coming to attention. Every eye in the room followed her rise. She stood 5 feet and 8 inches tall, not physically imposing by standard metrics, but her presence suddenly filled the space, a tangible force of command presence, that intangible quality that cannot be taught in a classroom, the authority that comes only from leading people in situations where mistakes cost lives. "Congressman Raskin just called me a Russian asset," she stated flatly. Raskin started to interrupt, his hand raising slightly, but she continued, her voice level and unstoppable. "I didn't say," Raskin began, but he was cut off. "This is not the first time I have heard this accusation," Tulsi continued, her gaze unwavering. "Secretary Clinton said it during my presidential campaign. Your colleagues repeated it on MSNBC for months on end. Your party's surrogates spread it across social media like wildfire." She looked directly at him now, her eyes locking onto his, unblinking and fierce. "And now, here in a Senate intelligence hearing, you have said it again." The room was absolutely still as she began to speak of her past, her voice never rising but gaining intensity. "I deployed to Iraq in 2004. It was a combat zone. I was 23 years old." She described her service in a field medical unit, treating wounded American soldiers, young men, mere boys, really suffering from shrapnel wounds, bullet wounds, and horrific burns. "I held their hands while they died. I wrote letters to their mothers." She paused, letting the weight of those memories fill the sterile hearing room. "I wore this nation's uniform for 20 years. I still serve in the Hawaii Army National Guard as a major." Her voice did not need to rise. The words carried their own devastating weight. "I hold a top-secret, sensitive compartmented information clearance," she declared, listing her credentials with surgical precision. "I passed the most rigorous background check in the United States government. Twice. I was confirmed by the Senate as Director of National Intelligence with a vote of 78 to 21, receiving bipartisan support." She paused for exactly 2 seconds, allowing the facts to land. "So, I am going to ask you directly. Congressman Raskin, do you have evidence that I am compromised by a foreign government? Do you have proof that I am a Russian asset? Do you have anything at all beyond your party's talking points?" The room was completely silent, a vacuum of sound where only the hum of the ventilation system could be heard. "Present your evidence now, or withdraw your slander," she commanded. Raskin shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his confident posture wavering slightly under her direct assault. "I didn't use the term asset," he stammered, backtracking. "I said, your statements echo. You implied." Tulsi's voice hardened, still controlled but with steel underneath the surface. "You implied treason," she corrected him, "against a combat veteran, against a sitting Director of National Intelligence. That is not a minor accusation, Congressman. That is calling for my prosecution, my imprisonment, and possibly my execution." She let that grim reality hang in the air between them. "So, I will ask again. Evidence now, or retract." Raskin's mouth opened and closed, searching for words. He looked to his fellow Democrats on the committee for support, but they were suddenly very interested in their papers, offering no backup, leaving him completely alone. "My statement was based on your public positions," he finally managed to say, his voice lacking its earlier theatrical power. "Regarding my positions," Tulsi nodded slowly, accepting the shift in terrain. "Let's discuss those." She began to dismantle his argument piece by piece. "I opposed the Iraq War. The war I fought in because I saw the waste, the lies, the young Americans dying for weapons of mass destruction that simply did not exist." She took one step forward, moving away from the safety of the witness table and into the open space of the floor. "I opposed regime change in Syria because I saw what regime change did in Libya. Chaos, death, terrorist safe havens, and more dead Americans." She took another step, closing the distance. "I opposed endless wars in Afghanistan. 20 years, trillions of dollars, thousands of American lives. For what? So the Taliban could take over the very day we left?" She stopped 10 feet from his position, standing tall and resolute. "You supported those wars, Congressman," she accused him. "From your classroom at American University, From your television appearances, from your comfortable congressional office, her voice was filled with a quiet disdain for the armchair warrior. You never saw combat. You never wore the uniform. You never watched friends die. She took a final step, standing just 5 feet away from him now. I earned my security clearance in blood and service. You earned yours in a classroom. There is a difference. The room erupted. It was not applause, but shock gasps filled the air. Reporters began typing frantically, and cameras flashed in a strobe light frenzy. Senator Warner hammered his gavel repeatedly, shouting, "Order! Order!" over the din. Raskin's face had gone bright red, the veins in his neck bulging as his carefully cultivated professor demeanor cracked wide open. "How dare you question my patriotism?" he shouted, losing control. "I have served this country and Congress for—" Tulsi's voice cut through his outburst, calm and precise as a scalpel. "I am not questioning your patriotism," she said. "I am questioning your authority to question mine." With that, she walked back to the witness table, sat down, folded her hands, and resumed her perfect composure. Warner finally restored order to the chaotic room. "Director Gabbard, please continue with your prepared testimony," he said, sounding exhausted. She opened a folder, pulled out a document, and projected it onto the screen behind her. "Before I became Director of National Intelligence, something happened to me," she began, shifting the narrative to a new, darker chapter. The hearing room lights dimmed slightly as the projector hummed to life, casting a stark, white rectangle against the screen behind Director Gabbard. The document displayed was mundane in appearance, official letterhead, standard font, but its implications were anything but ordinary. "July 24th, Tulsi began, her voice steady. "I was flying from Hawaii to Texas for a campaign event. I arrived at the airport, checked in, and approached the TSA checkpoint. The screen zoomed in on a specific section of the document, a Transportation Security Administration log with her name clearly visible. I was pulled aside for secondary screening," she explained. "The TSA agent wouldn't explain why. They took me to a separate room, searched my bags, and questioned me for 40 minutes. I missed my flight." She clicked a remote, and another document appeared, this one showing a pattern of dates. "This happened again, and again, and again," she said, the repetition echoing the frustration of those weeks. "Every single flight for 3 weeks, pulled aside, searched, questioned, events canceled." There was an edge to her voice now, a sharp note of personal pain cutting through the professional delivery. "I filed a Freedom of Information Act request. It took 6 months, but I finally got an answer." A new document flashed on the screen, an internal Department of Homeland Security communication. I had been placed on the Quiet Skies domestic terrorism watch list. Murmurs rippled through the gallery, shocked whispers from the press, uneasy shifting from the senators. Quiet Skies was a program notorious for its invasive nature, where federal air marshals shadowed subjects, monitoring their every move. "It is designed for suspected terrorists," Tulsi stated, looking directly into the camera lens, addressing the nation. "I am a former presidential candidate. I am a former member of Congress. I am a sitting major in the Army National Guard." She paused, letting the absurdity sink in. "And my government labeled me a domestic terrorist." She cycled through the evidence rapidly now. Document after document, she narrated. Air Marshal reports. Subject maintains calm demeanor. No suspicious activity. Routine travel. TSA screening logs. Subject cooperative. No contraband found. No threats detected. Every report says the same thing. Nothing suspicious. Just a citizen traveling. She then displayed the final document of the sequence. The bombshell. It was an internal memo detailing the justification. Subject exhibits pattern of rhetoric inconsistent with administration positions, she read aloud. Every word precise. Recent party departure and political endorsements raise counterintelligence concerns. Recommend Quiet Skies inclusion for monitoring purposes. She looked at Raskin, her expression unreadable. Translation: I criticized the Biden administration. I left the Democratic Party. I endorsed Donald Trump. So I was placed on a terrorism watch list. She let the silence stretch. Not because I was dangerous, because I was politically inconvenient. She pulled another document from her folder, one that made the blood drain from Raskin's face. Congressman Raskin, you served on the House Oversight Committee during this period. You were briefed on expanded domestic surveillance programs, including Quiet Skies. An email appeared on screen, sent from DHS to committee members, with Raskin's name on the distribution list. You were told about Americans being watch-listed for political speech. You were told about expanded surveillance of domestic extremists. You raised no objections. You approved expanded budgets for these programs. She leaned forward, her eyes pinning him to his chair. Did you know I was on that list, Congressman? Silence. Did you know that American citizens were being treated as terrorists for exercising their First Amendment rights? More silence. Did you care? Raskin stared at his notes, refusing to meet her gaze. Tulsi sat back, the tension in her posture releasing slightly, but the intensity remaining. I'm not here for an apology, she said dismissively. I'm here for accountability, because if it can happen to me, a former member of Congress, it can happen to anyone. And it did happen to anyone. To thousands of Americans. She closed the folder with a definitive snap. That's why I'm Director of National Intelligence now. To stop this, to reform these agencies, to restore Americans' trust, and to hold accountable the people who built this surveillance state. She looked at Raskin one last time. People like you. Raskin attempted to regain control, straightening in his chair and adjusting his glasses, summoning the ghost of his professor persona. Madame Director, with all due respect to your service. Stop! Tulsi interrupted, her voice sharp and clean. Raskin blinked, startled. Excuse me? Don't do that, she warned. Don't start with all due respect to your service, and then follow it with disrespect. I've heard it 1,000 times. It's a tell. It means you're about to dismiss everything I said. Raskin's face flushed. I was simply trying to. You were simply trying to condescend to me while pretending to honor my service, she corrected. Just make your point, Congressman. No need for the fake respect. Senator Warner intervened again. Director Gabbard, let's maintain decorum. I'm maintaining truth, Mr. Chairman, she replied without looking away from Raskin. Sometimes the two conflict. She stood again, reaching into her briefcase. She pulled out a small, metallic object and set it on the witness table with a sharp thud that echoed through the chamber. Combat Medical Badge, she announced, awarded for serving in a combat zone, providing medical care under direct or indirect enemy fire. Iraq, 2004 to 2005. She placed a second item beside it. A cloth patch, blue and gold. Kuwait deployment patch. Second deployment, 2008 to 2009. 15 months total deployed time. She pulled out her phone and synced it to the display. A new image appeared. Tulsi in Iraq, 23 years old. She wore a Kevlar helmet and body armor, a rifle slung across her chest. Her face was dirty, exhausted, standing outside a medical tent with the endless desert stretching behind her. It was hostile and undeniably real. A second image followed. Inside the medical tent, a wounded soldier lay on a gurney, blood soaking the bandages, Tulsi's hands working with focused intensity to save a life. A third image, Rows of soldiers in formation, saluting at a ceremony for those who never came home. "That's what service looks like, Congressman," she said softly. "Not classroom lectures. Not faculty lounges. Not Harvard degrees." The screen changed again, now displaying photos of Raskin. One showed him at his Harvard Law graduation, cap and gown, smiling with beaming parents. Another showed his faculty photo at American University, sitting in a comfortable chair in an office lined with books, diplomas on the wall. Safe, protected, elite. A third showed him teaching a classroom, students taking notes, a chalkboard behind him filled with constitutional law theory. "I don't question your patriotism, Congressman, but I question your authority to question mine," she repeated. "You taught law, while I bled for this country. Those are not equivalent." Raskin tried to respond, his voice tight. "My service to this nation, as an elected representative." "You were elected," she countered. "I volunteered. When I was 18 years old, I signed up to die if necessary." "What did you sign up for at 18? He had no answer. "I'll tell you what you signed up for. College, Harvard Law School, a comfortable career. Nothing wrong with that," she granted. "But it's not service. It's ambition." She pulled out more documents, and a timeline appeared on the screen detailing Raskin's voting record and statements. Iraq War Authorization, 2002. You supported it, said it was necessary to combat terrorism. Libya Intervention, 2011. You supported it, called it humanitarian. Syria Intervention Proposals, 2013 to 2017. You supported all of them. Afghanistan Surge, 2009. You supported it. Quotes from his speeches and interviews appeared alongside each vote. Every war, every intervention, every bombing campaign. You supported them all, she said, her voice hardening. From the safety of Congress. Never putting on a uniform, never deploying, never wondering if you'd come home. "I opposed those wars because I fought in them," she declared. "I saw the cost, not in theory, in reality, in blood, in shattered bodies, in young men crying for their mothers as they died." She pointed at the photos of the medical tent behind her. "I carried a wounded soldier to a helicopter while mortars fell around us. I held pressure on a femoral artery for 40 minutes because, if I let go, he'd bleed out. I watched 19-year-old kids with their legs blown off asking me if they'd walk again." She locked eyes with him. "You watched none of that. You read about it in the New York Times over coffee in your comfortable home, and you decided more war was the answer." She walked toward him again, stopping 5 steps away. "So when I came home and said, 'These wars are wrong. They're not making us safer. They're wasting American lives,' you called me what? Isolationist, appeaser, Assad apologist, Russian asset. I didn't learn about war from textbooks, Congressman," she said, her voice ringing in the silent room. "I learned it with my hands covered in American blood. And when I say a war is unjust, I'm not echoing Russian propaganda. I'm speaking from experience you will never have." Even Raskin's Democratic allies looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. They knew she was right. He was outmatched veteran versus academic, experience versus theory, reality versus abstraction. Raskin, desperate, tried a different angle. His voice softened, taking on a pained tone. "Madame Director, I lost my son, Tommy. He took his own life on December 31st, 2020. He was 25 years old." His voice cracked, a practiced perfection. "So I understand loss. I understand pain. I understand." "Stop." Tulsi's voice cut through, not loud, but final. He looked up, shocked. "Stop using your son's death as a shield? Gasps erupted from the gallery. Even some Republicans looked surprised. Nobody interrupts the grief card. "Your son's death is a tragedy," she said, her tone genuine. "I mean that. No parent should bury their child. My heart breaks for your family." She paused, her expression steeling. "But don't use his memory to deflect from accountability. You do this every time you're challenged. You bring up Tommy. You cry. You make people feel guilty for questioning you. That's manipulation." Raskin's face transformed from grief to rage in an instant. "How dare you?" "I dare because someone needs to say it," she replied, unshakable. "Your grief is real. Your loss is real. But it doesn't excuse your actions. It doesn't make you right. It doesn't give you permission to weaponize government against citizens." She pointed to the gallery. "There are families here who lost loved ones because of January 6th prosecutions. Fathers in prison for trespassing. Mothers who lost jobs for attending a rally. Children growing up without parents. Where's your empathy for them? Where are your tears for their families?" Devastating silence filled the room. "You use your son's death as a shield against criticism and a sword against opponents. That's not grief, Congressman. That's exploitation." Raskin couldn't speak. His mouth opened and closed, but nothing came out. "Two things can be true," she concluded, walking back to the witness table. "You're a grieving father, and you're a congressman who abused power. Your grief doesn't cancel your guilt." Director Gabbard sat back, the silence in the room heavy and uncomfortable following the confrontation regarding Raskin's son. She did not let the moment settle. She opened another folder, this one labeled clearly, and signaled for the display to update. "Now," she said, her voice cool and detached, "let's discuss the real issue. The accusation that started all of this. The lie you and your colleagues have repeated for years." The screen behind her lit up with a comprehensive timeline, a digital tapestry of accusations, statements, and media appearances arranged in chronological order. "The claim that I am a Russian asset," she stated. The first entry magnified. March 2017. "I met with Bashar al-Assad," she acknowledged. "A fact-finding mission as a member of Congress. Standard diplomatic practice. Members of Congress meet with foreign leaders regularly, including leaders we disagree with, including dictators." Photos appeared on the screen showing other congressional delegations, Republicans and Democrats alike, smiling and shaking hands with Saudi leaders, Chinese officials, and even Assad himself on earlier trips. "But when I did it," she said, turning to Raskin, "you called it treason. Why?" She didn't wait for an answer. "Because I came back and said this regime change war in Syria is wrong. I said, we're arming jihadists. I said this will create another Libya. And I was right. But you didn't want to hear it." The timeline shifted to October 2019. An audio clip began to play, filling the hearing room with the unmistakable voice of Hillary Clinton. "I think she's the favorite of the Russians. I'm not saying she's an asset, but she's clearly a Russian asset." The quote hung in the air. Undeniable. "Notice the construction," Tulsi analyzed, sounding like an intelligence officer dissecting a threat. "I'm not saying she's an asset, but she's an asset. Plausible deniability. Say it without saying it." Dozens of headlines cascaded down the screen, a waterfall of coordinated media attacks. NBC News, CNN, MSNBC, The Washington Post. Is Tulsi Gabbard a Russian asset? Suspicious relationship with Russia, amplifying Kremlin talking points. 4 years of this, she said quietly. Not one shred of evidence. Not one proof. Just accusation after accusation. Because I opposed your wars. Because I left your party. Because I dared to dissent. She pulled an official document from the folder, the FBI seal prominent at the top. The FBI investigated me twice, she revealed, stunning the room. First in 2019, during my presidential campaign, a counterintelligence investigation. Did I have improper foreign contacts? Was I coordinating with foreign governments? Was I compromised? She began to read the conclusion, her voice ringing with vindication. Investigation found no evidence of coordination with foreign government entities, no evidence of improper contacts. Subject maintains appropriate security protocols and demonstrates proper handling of sensitive information. No derogatory information identified. She produced a second document. Second investigation, 2022, after I left the Democratic Party. Same questions. Same process. More thorough this time, because I was being considered for senior positions. She read again. Extensive background investigation completed. Subject interviewed multiple times. Financial records reviewed. Travel history analyzed. Communications examined. No evidence of foreign influence or compromise detected. Subject recommended for top secret, sensitive compartmented information clearance renewal. She set the documents down and looked at Raskin with a piercing gaze. I passed twice. Clean. Because there's nothing there. Never was. Never will be. A new image appeared on the screen. Her current security clearance certificate, valid and active. Do you know what disqualifies someone from this clearance level, Congressman? Foreign influence, unexplained foreign contacts, financial connections to foreign entities, anything suggesting compromise or susceptibility to blackmail. She leaned forward, her intensity pinning him to his seat. I passed the most rigorous security investigation in the United States government multiple times, including a full-scope polygraph. Do you know what they ask in those polygraphs? She listed the questions, her voice rhythmic, hypnotic. Have you ever been approached by a foreign intelligence service? No. Have you ever agreed to provide information to a foreign government? No. Have you ever accepted money or gifts from foreign entities? No. Have you ever engaged in any activity that could be used to blackmail or coerce you? No. Clean, she whispered. Every question, every test, every investigation, because I'm not a Russian asset. I'm an American patriot who disagrees with your foreign policy. She stood up then, walking to the center of the room, commanding the space entirely. But let's talk about your foreign contacts, Congressman. The screen shifted instantly. Raskin's travel records appeared public information, congressional delegation reports. All undeniable. You've traveled to Israel 8 times in 5 years, she recited, met with Israeli intelligence officials, attended conferences funded by foreign lobbying groups, received briefings from Mossad. Another document flashed up. Financial records. Your campaign committees received $147,000 from pro-Israel PACs in the last election cycle. Much of that money originated from foreign nationals donating through American intermediaries. More images appeared. Raskin shaking hands with Ukrainian officials, smiling in meetings since 2022. You've met with Ukrainian officials dozens of times. You've advocated for billions in aid. You've pushed for weapons transfers. You've called for more American involvement. I'm not saying you're compromised, Tulsi said, her voice dangerously calm. I'm not saying those contacts are improper. They're not. They're normal congressional activity. She paused, letting the trap snap shut. But by your standard, the standard you apply to me, you'd be suspicious too. Foreign money, foreign contacts, foreign policy positions that align with foreign governments. She laid out the hypocrisy with surgical precision. The difference is simple. You met with allies, so it's patriotism. I met with an adversary to understand their position, so it's treason. You support Israel, so it's pro-American. I question regime change wars, so it's pro-Russian. Her voice rose slightly, not a shout, but with the force of absolute conviction. The word you're looking for isn't Russian asset, Congressman, it's political opponent. And in your world, those are the same thing. She walked back to her seat but didn't sit. She stood behind the chair, gripping the backrest, looming over the proceedings. You don't have evidence because there is no evidence. You have disagreement. Policy differences. A former Democrat who exposed your party's corruption and left. That's what you can't forgive. Not some imaginary Russian connection. My betrayal of your tribe. She finally sat down. I'm not betraying America. I betrayed you, and you can't handle it. Tulsi opened a new folder, thicker than the others, heavy with the weight of official seals. This is the counterattack, she murmured, barely audible, before raising her voice for the record. Congressman Raskin, you served as vice chair of the January 6th Select Committee. Raskin straightened, a flash of pride returning to his demeanor. This was his defining work, his legacy. I did, he replied. We conducted the most thorough investigation into an attack on our democracy. You withheld evidence, Tulsi stated flatly. The room went silent. Reporters stopped typing. Cameras zoomed in. Excuse me? Raskin blinked. You withheld evidence from the American people, from defendants, and from the courts, she repeated. She pulled a document from the folder Department of Defense letterhead. As Director of National Intelligence, I have access to all intelligence, including Capitol Police communications from January 6th, including FBI reports, including Department of Defense readiness assessments, including evidence your committee had but chose not to release. The first document appeared on the screen, heavily redacted but with key passages highlighted in yellow. Capitol Police Memo, January 5th, 2021. One day before, Tulsi noted. She read the text. Intelligence assessment suggests possible violence at tomorrow's rally. Crowd size estimates between 200,000 and 500,000. Recommend National Guard deployment. 3,000 troops minimum. Perimeter expansion advised. Tulsi looked up. That recommendation was sent to House leadership, including Speaker Pelosi, including Congressman Hoyer. They declined. No National Guard deployed in advance. Your committee had this document. You never mentioned it in hearings. You never released it publicly. Why? Raskin tried to interrupt, sensing the danger. The security failures were. I'm not done, she cut him off. Her command voice returning, the voice that stopped men in combat zones. Raskin closed his mouth. Second document, she announced. FBI Washington Field Office Report, January 4th, 2 days before the event. She read, Source reporting indicates Proud Boys leadership, planning defensive posture on January 6th. Expect confrontation if Antifa or counter-protesters engage. Assessment. Limited violence potential. No credible threats to Capitol complex. She let that sink in. The FBI assessed limited violence potential 2 days before. Your committee presented this as a planned insurrection, a coordinated attack, proof of Trump's plot. But the FBI's own assessment, 2 days prior, said limited violence. She moved to the third document. The most damning yet. National Guard deployment authorization timeline. This is critical. A minute-by-minute breakdown appeared on the screen. 2:22, 4 p.m. Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund requests National Guard assistance, denied by House Sergeant-at-Arms Paul Irving. 2:36 p.m. Chief Sund calls Army Secretary McCarthy directly, requests immediate deployment. McCarthy says he needs Pentagon approval. 3 p.m. Pentagon leadership meeting convened to debate the optics of troops at the Capitol. 4:32 p.m. National Guard finally authorized. Over 2 hours, Tulsi said, standing and pointing at the timeline, while officers were being assaulted, while the building was breached, while people were in danger. The National Guard sat 8 minutes away, waiting for permission. She turned on him. Your committee blamed Capitol Police. You blamed Trump. But this timeline shows Pentagon delays, congressional leadership delays, bureaucratic paralysis. You had these documents. You never showed them, because they complicated your narrative. Raskin was on his feet now, desperate. We showed extensive timeline evidence. You showed selective evidence, she corrected him. Only what fit your conclusion. Let me show you what you hid. Let me show you what you hid, Tulsi declared, her voice echoing with a chilling finality. She pressed a button on her remote, and the screen behind her flickered from static documents to high-definition video. The footage was grainy but unmistakable. Time-stamped January 6th, 2:47 p.m. It was security camera feed from the Capitol Police. This is from the magnetic lock doors on the Upper West Terrace, she narrated, stepping aside so the cameras could capture the image clearly. On the screen, Capitol Police officers were visible, not fighting, not retreating, and certainly not being overrun. Instead, they were standing calmly by the heavy double doors. One officer reached out and pressed the panic bar, holding the door open. He then waved his arm, a clear gesture of invitation, ushering people inside. Magnetic locks on these doors require active release from the inside, Tulsi explained, her voice cutting through the stunned silence of the room. Someone inside had to trigger the mechanism. These doors weren't breached, Congressman. They were opened. The video cycled to different angles. Different doors, same pattern. Officers standing aside, watching as hundreds of people walked in calmly. Some looked confused. Others were taking selfies. There was no violence in these specific clips, only a bizarre, surreal procession. Your committee showed the world video of violent entry, breaking windows, and fighting police. That happened, and it was wrong, she acknowledged. But you didn't show this. You didn't show the hundreds of people simply walking in through open doors, waved in by the very officers sworn to protect the building. She turned to face him. Why not? Because it suggests something more complex than your insurrection narrative, doesn't it? She pulled out another document. This one stamped attorney-client privilege, but as DNI, her authority superseded the classification. Committee Internal Memo, June 2022, she read. This is from your Chief Investigative Counsel. She began to quote the text, her voice dripping with disdain. Discussion regarding FBI informant and undercover agent presence on January 6th. Recommendation. Do not emphasize in public hearings. Could undermine narrative of organic uprising. Focus on Proud Boys and Oath Keepers' leadership. Raskin's face went pale. He tried to speak, his voice cracking. Those informants were the context. How many? Tulsi demanded. Silence stretched between them. How many FBI informants were in the crowd that day, Congressman? He wouldn't answer. He couldn't. I'll tell you, she said, because now I have access to that information. 26. Gasps erupted from the gallery again. Even the senators looked shocked. 26 federal assets in the crowd. 26 FBI informants were in the crowd on January 6th. She repeated, for the cameras. Some were embedded in Proud Boys' leadership. Some were in the Oath Keepers. Some were just in the crowd. All of them were reporting back to the FBI. All of them were providing real-time intelligence. And your committee knew, she accused him, because the FBI briefed you multiple times. She flashed a new document. FBI briefing to January 6th. Committee, March 2022. She read the key excerpt. Bureau assets provided real-time intelligence. Asset reporting indicates no pre-planned, violent attack on Capitol. Crowd action appeared spontaneous response to building breach by initial group. Tulsi's voice rose, filling the chamber. No pre-planned violent attack. That is what the FBI's own informants reported. But you sold America a story of a coordinated insurrection, a planned coup, a master plot. She stepped closer to the witness table. You withheld evidence of FBI informants. You withheld evidence of National Guard delays. You withheld evidence of Capitol Police opening doors. You withheld evidence that contradicted your predetermined conclusion. She walked toward Raskin, who was now slumped in his chair, looking deflated. You didn't conduct an investigation, Congressman. You produced a show trial. You had your conclusion before you saw a single piece of evidence. And you destroyed anyone who didn't fit that conclusion. A final document in this sequence appeared. A list of 673 Americans charged with crimes related to January 6th. Many for trespassing, some for parading. One man was charged for walking through an open door, taking a selfie, and leaving. She noted. Photos of the defendants appeared on the screen. Regular people, grandmothers, veterans, small business owners, their lives destroyed, careers gone, families bankrupted, all while you hid evidence that might have helped their defense. She stopped 5 feet from him. That's not justice. That's not defending democracy. That's weaponizing the government to punish political opponents. Her voice dropped to a near whisper, but every word was amplified by the microphone. And you did it all while claiming to protect the Constitution. Tulsi returned to her table and opened the largest folder yet. It was thick, substantial, with the DNI seal prominently displayed on the cover. Now, she said, let's discuss the consequences of your lies. She lifted the report. Its weight was palpable. In my first 60 days as Director of National Intelligence, I ordered a comprehensive audit of all domestic surveillance programs. Every watch list, every monitoring system, every database tracking Americans. She flipped open the report. What I found was staggering and terrifying. The executive summary projected onto the screen, 47,000 Americans. 47,000 Americans on various government watch lists, she announced. Not foreign terrorists, not international criminals, Americans, U.S. citizens living in the United States. She turned the page. Of those 47,000, 42,000 were added between January 2021 and December 2024. She let the date sink in. The Biden administration's first term. She moved to the criteria section. Why were they added? I'll read directly from the report. She quoted, participation in January 6th rally or related activities. Posted anti-government rhetoric on social media. Association with MAGA political groups. Donated to certain political candidates. Expressed support for election integrity claims. Let that sink in, she urged the room. 4,800 Americans watch-listed for attending a political rally. Not for entering the Capitol. Not for violence. For attending a rally, a First Amendment-protected activity. 8,000. 200 Americans watch-listed for social media posts criticizing lockdowns or questioning elections. Speech. Protected speech. 3,000. 400 Americans watch-listed for associating with MAGA groups. Also protected by the First Amendment. Photos began appearing on the screen, real people, faces visible, names redacted for privacy. Grandmother from Wisconsin. Tulsi pointed out. Attended the Trump rally on January 6th. Never went near the Capitol. Stayed on the National Mall. Went home. 6 months later, she was pulled aside at an airport, questioned, and watch-listed. Next photo. Veteran from Texas. Former Army Ranger, Purple Heart recipient. Posted on Facebook criticizing the Biden administration's withdrawal from Afghanistan. Watch-listed. Next photo. Small business owner from Florida. Donated $500 to the Trump campaign. Posted American flag emojis on Twitter. Watch-listed. Photo after photo, she said, gesturing to the screen as the faces cycled past. Regular Americans, grandparents, veterans, teachers, nurses, truckers. These aren't terrorists, Congressman. These are citizens exercising their constitutional rights, and their government labeled them threats. She closed the report and looked directly at Raskin. Your committee recommended this, she said, her voice turning cold. In your final report, December 2022, Chapter 7, she pulled up the specific text. Recommendations for preventing future attacks. Expand domestic terrorism monitoring capabilities. Increase social media surveillance. Lower threshold for watch list inclusion. Broaden definition of domestic violent extremism to include rhetoric that could inspire violence. Translation. Spy on more Americans for their speech, for their politics, for their beliefs, she interpreted. You built this system, Congressman. You and your colleagues on that committee. You turned intelligence agencies designed to stop al-Qaeda into tools to target American citizens. She held up one final document in this sequence. Department of Homeland Security Internal Memo, March 2023. She read it aloud. Pursuant to congressional recommendations from the January 6th committee, expand Quiet Skies program to include individuals flagged for domestic extremism indicators. Indicators include attendance at Stop the Steal rallies, social media posts questioning election results, association with militia groups or MAGA organizations. She set it down carefully, almost gently. That is how I ended up on a terrorist watch list, she said softly. Not because I am dangerous, because I criticized the government, because I left the Democratic Party, because I endorsed Donald Trump. She looked at him with pity and contempt. If it can happen to me, a former congresswoman, a presidential candidate, a combat veteran, and a sitting DNI, it can happen to anyone. And it did. She stood again. The crescendo building. You weaponized the intelligence community. You turned the FBI into a political police force. You made the IRS target conservatives. You used the DOJ to prosecute opponents. You built a surveillance state aimed at Americans. And you did it all while crying about threats to democracy. Her voice filled the room, not shouting, but powerful, undeniable, shaking the walls. You are the threat to democracy, Congressman. You are the one who weaponized government. You are the one who spied on citizens. You are the one who labeled political opponents as terrorists. You are the tyrant you claim to fight. Raskin looked cornered, desperate. His face had transformed from a flush of anger to a sickly pallor, beads of sweat now visible on his forehead, despite the aggressive air conditioning of the hearing room. The carefully constructed persona of the constitutional scholar, the smug academic, who lectured the nation on morality, shattered in real time. He was no longer the professor. He was a panicked bureaucrat watching his world collapse. He tried one more counterattack, standing shakily and gripping the edge of the table until his knuckles turned white. "Madam Director," he began, his voice trembling, "your accusations are serious, but you are ignoring the real threat. The real danger to this country is disinformation. It is Russian propaganda. It is the undermining of our institutions. Tulsi did not move. She did not react. She simply watched him. A predator, observing wounded prey. We had to take extraordinary measures, Raskin pleaded, his voice rising in pitch. Yes, because the threat was extraordinary. An attempted coup, an insurrection. The first violent transfer of power in American history. We had to. Congressman, her voice cut through his diatribe, calm, surgical, and building in momentum. Did you leak classified information to the media? He stopped mid-sentence, his mouth hanging open. What? Did you leak classified information? Yes or no? I don't. That's not. We had authorization to. Show me the authorization, she demanded. Silence filled the room. Show me the declassification order. Show me the approval from the Intelligence Committee. Show me any documentation, any at all, that you were permitted to discuss classified information with reporters. Raskin's mouth worked, but no sound came out. Tulsi reached into her briefcase and pulled out a new stack of documents. These are the kill shots, she whispered to herself before addressing the room. In your role on the January 6th committee, you had access to classified intelligence briefings, FBI reports, NSA communications intercepts, CIA assessments, top secret, SCI material. The first document appeared on the screen behind her. You then appeared on television repeatedly. Let me show you. A video montage began playing on the screen. It was Raskin, captured in high definition on various news sets. Clip 1. MSNBC, March 2022. Raskin sat forward, looking grave. I've seen intelligence that shows clear coordination between Proud Boys' leadership and... He stopped himself, shaking his head theatrically. I can't say more, but it's damning. Clip 2. CNN, June 2022. Raskin nodding knowingly. The evidence includes communications between Trump's inner circle and... Again, he stopped. Classified, but Americans will understand when it's released. Clip 3. ABC, September 2022. We've been briefed by intelligence agencies about the role of... He paused. I shouldn't say more. National security. Clip after clip played Raskin dancing right up to the line, sometimes crossing it, always implying he knew secrets, always suggesting classified information supported his narrative. Tulsi froze the video on the first clip. MSNBC, March 22nd, 2022. You said, quote, I've seen intelligence that shows clear coordination between Proud Boys' leadership, end quote. She held up a document with a heavy FBI classified stamp visible. That intelligence was a top-secret FBI field report dated March 15th, 1 week before your appearance. It contained specific information about Proud Boys, communications, intercepts, methods, and sources. She slammed a second document onto the table. Those methods and sources were compromised. The room gasped. 10 days after your appearance, she continued, her voice icy, an FBI counterintelligence investigation traced a leak to your interview. The Proud Boys' leadership changed their communications methods immediately after. They went dark. She looked up from the document, staring directly at Raskin. You revealed classified sources and methods on national television to score political points, and you compromised an ongoing FBI investigation. She moved to the next example. Rapid fire. CNN appearance. June 7th. You discussed classified communications between Trump's inner circle. That information came from a national security agency intercept TS, SCI. You weren't authorized to even hint at its existence. ABC appearance, September 19th. You mentioned intelligence agencies briefed us about the role of, and then stopped. But you'd already revealed there was intelligence about a specific role in a specific context. That is classification spillage. Document after document, she said, pointing to the stack. 12 separate instances where you either directly revealed or heavily implied classified information in media appearances. She paused, letting the weight of the number hang in the air. I have referred all 12 instances to the Department of Justice for prosecution consideration under Title 18, United States Code. Section 798. Disclosure of classified information. She set the stack of documents on the witness table. The sound echoed like a gavel strike. Each count carries up to 10 years imprisonment. The room was dead silent. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Raskin's lawyer, who had been sitting behind him trying to remain invisible, finally stood up. He leaned forward, whispering urgently into Raskin's ear. Raskin waved him away, his eyes wild. "Mistake," Tulsi noted coldly. "Huge mistake." "I had authorization," Raskin shouted, his voice cracking. "The committee authorized." "The committee doesn't grant classification authority," she corrected him instantly. "Only the originating agency can declassify information." "Did the FBI authorize you to discuss their field report?" No answer. "Did the NSA authorize you to reveal the existence of their intercepts?" No answer. "Did any intelligence agency give you written permission to discuss classified information in media appearances?" Silence. Damning, absolute silence. "You leaked, Congressman," she said. "Without authorization. For political advantage. To damage your opponents. To build your narrative. To make yourself look important on television." She walked toward him slowly. Deliberately. The intelligence community has a saying, "Loose lips sink ships." We drill that into every person with a clearance from day one. Don't talk about classified information. Ever. Not to family. Not to friends. Definitely not to reporters. She stopped 5 feet away. "But you did. Repeatedly. 12 times. Because you thought you were special. You thought you were above the rules. You thought your political goals justified breaking the law. Let me tell you about someone else who leaked classified information," she said softly. "Reality winner. An NSA contractor. She leaked a classified report to The Intercept. She believed it served the public interest. She thought Americans needed to know about Russian interference." Tulsi leaned in. "She got 5 years in prison. Served 3. Felony conviction. Life destroyed. How is what you did different?" Raskin finally found his voice. It was weak, defensive, pathetic. "I'm a member of Congress. I have oversight responsibilities. Context is important. Yes or no?" The shout echoed through the chamber command voice at maximum volume. The voice that makes soldiers freeze in place. Everyone in the room jumped. Senators, reporters, Raskin himself. "Did you leak classified information without proper authorization? Yes or no?" Raskin stammered, completely broken. The information I shared I believed it was important for the American people to—" "That's a yes," she interrupted. "You just admitted it. On camera. Under oath. You leaked classified information because you believed it was important." She turned immediately to Chairman Warner. "Mr. Chairman, the witness just admitted to unauthorized disclosure of classified information. As Director of National Intelligence, I formally request this committee refer this matter to the Department of Justice for immediate criminal investigation." Warner looked uncomfortable. He was a Democrat, a colleague, but he was also chairman of the Intelligence Committee. He knew the law. He knew she was right. "Director Gabbard," he began slowly, "we'll take that under advisement." "With respect, Mr. Chairman," Tulsi said, not backing down an inch. "This isn't advisory. A sitting member of Congress just admitted to a felony. 12 felonies. In fact, that requires action. She stood there, the warrior now, the soldier who took an oath and meant it. I've provided documented evidence of 12 separate violations. I've provided video evidence of his admissions. I've provided damage assessments showing compromised sources and methods, and now I have his confession. This committee's responsibility is oversight of intelligence agencies, she reminded him. That includes oversight of Congress members with access to classified information. If you don't act, you are condoning the very abuses you are supposed to prevent. Warner looked at his fellow committee members. The Republicans were nodding vigorously. Even some Democrats looked resigned, knowing there was no way out of this box. Raskin had always been too theatrical, too self-important. He wasn't popular enough to save, not with this amount of evidence. Very well, Warner said, his voice heavy. The committee will vote on a criminal referral at the end of this hearing. Tulsi nodded once. Today, Mr. Chairman, the referral happens today, or I go to the Attorney General directly. She meant it. Everyone could see she meant it. Very well, Warner repeated. Tulsi turned back to Raskin. He was sitting now, slumped in his chair, defeated. His lawyer had given up trying to advise him. The damage was done. Career over. Prison looming. But Tulsi wasn't finished. She stood in the center of the room. Between the committee and Raskin, every eye was on her. Every camera focused. This was the moment that would be remembered, clipped, shared, and viewed millions of times. She spoke not to Raskin, but to America, to the cameras, to history. I took an oath at 18 years old, she began, her voice steady and strong. When I enlisted in the Hawaii Army National Guard, I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I took that oath again when I deployed to Iraq, Tulsi continued, her voice resonating with a quiet, unyielding power. When they pinned on my sergeant's stripes, when I came home, when I became an officer, I took it again when I was sworn in as a member of Congress 4 times every 2 years. And I took it again when I became Director of National Intelligence. 7 times I have taken that oath, and I meant it every single time. She looked down at Raskin, her expression stripping away whatever remained of his political armor. You took that oath too, Congressman, when you were sworn in. Multiple times. Same words, same promise. She paused, letting the question hang in the air like a guillotine blade. Did you mean it? He didn't answer. He couldn't, because from where I'm standing, you forgot what those words mean. Support and defend the Constitution. Not your party. Not your political allies. Not your career. The Constitution. She began to pace slowly, addressing the gallery, the cameras, the nation. The First Amendment protects American speech, even speech you disagree with, even speech critical of the government, especially that speech. The Fourth Amendment protects Americans from unreasonable searches and seizures, from government surveillance without cause. The Fifth Amendment guarantees due process, fair trials, the presumption of innocence. Her voice rose, forceful and passionate. You violated all of those amendments. You built a surveillance state. You targeted political opponents. You ran show trials disguised as investigations. You leaked classified information to destroy people. You weaponized the government against Americans. And you did it all while claiming to defend democracy, while wrapping yourself in the Constitution, while lecturing others about threats to our republic. She stepped toward him for the final approach. You're not defending democracy, Congressman. You're the one destroying it. You're the tyrant. You're the threat. You're everything you claim to fight against. Her voice dropped to a deadly quiet. I deployed to Iraq to fight people who wanted to destroy America. I watched friends die defending this country. I never imagined the biggest threat would come from inside, from people like you, elected officials who weaponize government against their own citizens. She stood 3 feet away now, staring down at him. You called me a Russian asset, a traitor, someone who betrayed America. But I'm not the traitor here, Congressman. You are. The words hung in the air, final, irrevocable. I kept my oath. You broke yours. I defended the Constitution. You perverted it. I served America. You served yourself. She straightened, her military bearing returning in full force. As Director of National Intelligence, I have the authority and responsibility to protect classified information, to prevent its unauthorized disclosure, to hold accountable anyone who compromises national security. That includes members of Congress. The verdict: Congressman Jamie Raskin, she announced formally. I am formally recommending to the Department of Justice that you be prosecuted for unauthorized disclosure of classified information. Multiple counts, multiple felonies. I am recommending to the House Ethics Committee that you be investigated for abuse of power, violation of House rules, and conduct unbecoming a member of Congress. I am recommending to this committee that your security clearance be immediately revoked and that you be barred from accessing any classified information pending investigation. She gathered her materials, closing her folders with precise, deliberate movements. She stood tall. You want to know why I left the Democratic Party? Because of people like you. Because the party I joined, the party of FDR, of JFK, of civil liberties and government accountability, became the party of surveillance states and political persecution. You wear the Constitution like a costume. I live it like a creed. Final words, directed straight into the camera lens. To every American watching this, to every citizen who's been targeted for their beliefs, who's been watch-listed for their speech, who's been persecuted for their politics, I see you, I believe you, and I'm fighting for you, because that's what the oath means. Support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I fought foreign enemies in Iraq. Now I'm fighting domestic enemies here. She picked up her briefcase, and I don't lose. She walked out. She didn't look back. The room erupted into absolute chaos. Reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing, senators conferring frantically. But one image captured everything. Raskin slumped at the witness table, destroyed, while Tulsi walked away confident, victorious, righteous. The warrior had defeated the tyrant. The aftermath. The screen cut to a CNN breaking news banner, scrolling urgently. Breaking. Department of Justice announces indictment of former Congressman Jamie Raskin. The anchor's voice was somber. Former Maryland Congressman Jamie Raskin has been indicted on 8 counts of unauthorized disclosure of classified information. The indictment stems from his appearances on news programs during his tenure on the January 6th committee. If convicted on all counts, Raskin faces up to 80 years in prison. Footage played of Raskin walking down courthouse steps with his lawyers. He was no longer the confident professor. His head was down, his shoulders slumped. He offered no statement to the press. A reporter's voiceover noted, Raskin resigned from Congress last month following the House Ethics Committee's recommendation for expulsion. He faces trial in 6 weeks. The scene shifted to Fox News. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard stood at a press conference podium. The DNI seal behind her professional. Composed, authoritative. In the past 90 days, she announced, we've removed 31,000 Americans from government watch lists, 31,000 citizens who were flagged for protected First Amendment activity. We've disbanded the FBI's Domestic Terrorism Coordination Unit that was targeting political speech. We've ended the partnership between intelligence agencies and social media companies that was censoring Americans. We've declassified thousands of documents related to surveillance abuses, FISA court violations, and political targeting. And we've fired 47 senior intelligence officials who put politics above duty. She looked directly at the camera. The intelligence community exists to protect Americans, not to spy on them. That mission is restored. Cut to the White House. President Trump at the podium. Director Gabbard is doing an incredible job. Incredible. She's cleaning up the mess. The deep state is being dismantled. Finally, when a reporter shouted a question about Raskin's claims of political prosecution, Trump interrupted. Political? He admitted it on camera. He leaked classified information. That's not political. That's illegal. Next question. Social media exploded. Hashtags like number Tulsi was right, number Raskin indicted, and number deep state exposed trended globally. The clip of Tulsi saying, "I kept my oath, you broke yours," garnered 40 million views. The moment she walked out while Raskin sat, defeated hit 50 million. Conservative America had a new hero, a warrior who fought the system and won. Arlington. Early morning at Arlington National Cemetery. The air was cool, the atmosphere quiet and sacred. Tulsi walked alone, no security detail, no staff. Just her and the fallen. She was dressed in civilian clothes, jeans, a simple jacket, running shoes, the off-duty warrior. She walked to Section 60, where the veterans of the recent wars Iraq and Afghanistan rested. She stopped at a specific grave, Sergeant First Class Michael Rodriguez, killed in action, Iraq, 2005, age 26. She knelt and placed a small American flag at the headstone. "Hey, Mike," she whispered. "It's been a while." The morning breeze rustled through the trees. "I promised you something in Iraq. When we loaded you onto that helicopter, when I couldn't save you, I promised I'd protect what you died for." She touched the cold stone. "I'm keeping that promise. The Constitution you swore to defend, the rights you fought for, the Americans you protected. I'm fighting for them now, not with a rifle, not in a desert, but here in Washington, against people who forgot what service means." She stood and looked at the rows of white headstones stretching into the distance. Thousands of them. Thousands of promises made. Thousands of sacrifices given. You all died, believing America was worth it. That our system, for all its flaws, was worth defending. That the Constitution meant something. I won't let your deaths be for nothing. I won't let politicians pervert what you died for. I won't let your sacrifice be used to justify tyranny. The sun began to rise over the cemetery, casting a golden light on the stones. "Rest easy, Mike. All of you. I've got the watch now." She saluted, slow, deliberate, respectful. She turned and walked away through the rows of graves, past the tomb of the unknown soldier, past the eternal flame. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Work. Always work. An intelligence briefing. A threat assessment. The daily grind of protecting America. "This is Director Gabbard," she answered. She listened, her face setting into a determined line. "Proceed with the operation. Keep me updated every 2 hours." She hung up and continued walking. The warrior's work never ends. But she didn't complain. Because this is the oath. This is the promise. This is the mission. Support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. She had fought both. She had defeated both. And she would keep fighting for every American who believes in the Constitution. For every veteran who served honorably. For every family destroyed by political persecution. She reached her car and looked back at the cemetery one last time. "I kept my oath," she whispered to the fallen. For all of you. And I'll never stop. She drove away into the sunrise, into another day of service. The warrior, the patriot, the defender of the Constitution, Tulsi Gabbard.